Wendy Zuckerman, and you're listening to Science Versus. This is the show that pits facts against acetaminophen. Today on the show, does taking Tylenol when you're pregnant make it more likely that your kid will be autistic? This idea has been all over the news the past couple weeks because of a big report that's coming from the US government. It's supposedly going to reveal the true causes of autism. And now what's going around is the claim that it's going to talk about Tylenol.
HHS is set to release a report that will link autism to Tylenol use during pregnancy.
The use of Tylenol by pregnant women may be linked to autism in children.
The claim is shaking up medicine and raising questions from doctors.
And the government hasn't confirmed that the report will talk about acetaminophen. But this idea, it isn't something that came out of nowhere or some totally fringe scientific theory. There are lots of legit studies on this, and some of them do seem to suggest that popping acetaminophen during pregnancy is linked not just to autism, but to ADHD and other stuff going on with the brain. Meanwhile, fears around taking Tylenol when you're pregnant have been spreading on social media for years, and these new reports have added fuel to the fire.
I have been scared to death for days.
Here's why you shouldn't take Tylenol if you're pregnant or you're thinking about getting pregnant.
I took Tylenol throughout my whole pregnancy. I have a lot of fucking questions right now, and people better start fucking talking.
And yeah, this does raise some big effing questions, because tons of people take meds with acetaminophen in them when they're pregnant. Studies find that more than half of pregnant people in the US take these drugs. So what's going on here? Can taking Tylenol when you're pregnant up the chance that your kid will be autistic? When it comes to Tylenol, a lot of people are like,
I have a lot of fucking questions right now.
but then there's science. Science Versus will be right back after the break.
Did you lock the front door?
Check.
Close the garage door?
Yep.
Installed window sensors, smoke sensor, and HD cameras with night vision?
No.
And you set up credit card transaction alerts, a secure VPN for a private connection, and continuous monitoring for our personal info on the dark web?
I'm looking into it.
Stress less about security. Choose security solutions from TELUS for peace of mind at home and online. Visit TELUS.com/total security to learn more. Conditions apply.
Welcome back. This is Meryl, and today we're diving into this question of whether there's a link between acetaminophen and autism, why it looks like it's gotten more common in the past few decades. And while I was working on that, I talked to a scientist who looked at Tylenol or acetaminophen. So it was kind of perfect, because when I saw all of this was hitting the news, I was like, oh, now I can call that guy back up.
You had this in your back pocket, just waiting to go.
Yeah, it was
That's
all
great.
set to go. So yeah, this is Brian Lee, professor of epidemiology at Drexel University. Hello.
Hey, Meryl.
How are you?
It's been a very hectic last few days.
I bet. Yeah, he's getting kind of swarmed, and I wanted him to help me understand like where this idea came from in the first place. This idea that acetaminophen could affect a fetus. Like if we were going to build the case against acetaminophen, science, where would this? These concerns have been floating around.
It's been previously linked with other sort of disorders, for example, specific birth defects, possible sex hormone issues. Yes.
Huh. So this was surprising to me, like sex hormone issues?
So Tylenol or acetaminophen, we already know it can affect a fetus.
Well, there had been research on it for sure.
Okay.
Suggesting that there might be some risks here, it was surprising to me because I have been pregnant, and doctors will always tell you that Tylenol and other stuff with acetaminophen in it is the safe one to take. You're not supposed to take ibuprofen because that's thought to mess up blood flow to the fetus and has been linked to congenital birth defects. Acetaminophen is thought to be like the safer of the two.
I didn't know that. So like if you're pregnant and you feel fluey or you have some pain, you're supposed to take Tylenol, not one of the other ones.
Yeah, that's why it's so common so long thought to be relatively safe.
But even though they had these suspicions from these other conditions?
Well, there had been these kind of like trickling out of like concerns, like Brian said, that it might be messing with sex hormones, kind of acting as an endocrine disruptor.
That's so random.
Yeah, no, at first I was like, what? But apparently back 15 years ago, some researchers pointed out that some painkillers sort of look like a type of endocrine disruptor that I'm sure you've heard of, phthalates.
Sure. They're an element to be an endocrine disruptor.
Exactly, yeah. And so they tried testing whether painkillers, including acetaminophen, acted like phthalates when they put them on cells in a dish. And they found that, yeah, they kind of did.
Oh, interesting.
And we think phthalates might mess up hormones like testosterone in the body. And so researchers started looking into this, and some of them did find that people who took acetaminophen during pregnancy were more likely to have a son with undescended testicles when they were born.
Huh, okay.
Yeah, so some researchers were finding these things, not in every study, but there were these hints that something might be going on here. And that was the backdrop for this new wave of studies looking at the brain, because we know that hormones can affect brain development. So if something's messing with the hormones, maybe it could also change how the brain is developing in the fetus.
Okay, that makes sense.
And then studies start coming, looking at whether pregnant people who took acetaminophen were more likely to have autism. So like, some of them would get thousands of pregnant moms and ask them some questions.
They collected data on whether a mom used acetaminophen.
Mm-hmm.
Did you take Tylenol? Yes, no, that kind of thing. And then they followed the baby after it was born to see if the baby developed autism.
Mm-hmm. That's useful for our purposes.
Yeah, exactly. Like they followed these kids and then checked whether they were autistic. And these studies, they were finding stuff, but it was a little weird. Like one of these studies found that it upped the chance for autism, but only when the autism was accompanied by hyperactivity symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
Another study found that boys were more likely to be autistic with this exposure to acetaminophen in the womb, but not girls.
Huh. Okay. Kind of confusing.
Yeah, like none of these studies was like a slam dunk on its own, but at the same time, dozens of other studies were also coming out looking at other stuff, especially ADHD, and finding that rates of ADHD were up in these kids exposed to acetaminophen in the womb.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, in some cases it looked like the link was strongest for mothers who took acetaminophen pretty often, like in all 3 trimesters.
So there's like a dose response element as well.
That's what it looked like. And in 2021, this all comes to a head. A paper comes out from a bunch of researchers who'd been studying this called a consensus statement. They issued a, quote, call for precautionary action, unquote, and basically suggested that people should pump the brakes on these pills, minimize the amount of acetaminophen that they take during pregnancy.
It off. They publish in a Nature journal, which is one of the most highly regarded scientific journals out there.
And so this statement really made scientists pay attention.
Up until that point, most people just kind of treated it like, oh, like a new study pops up every day, you aren't really sure what to believe or not.
Mm-hmm.
But once the consensus statement came out, it gave it like a stamp of authority.
Yeah, I would feel that way about a consensus statement in Nature.
Yeah.
Or a Nature offshoot. Yeah.
And some parents even started suing the companies that make meds with acetaminophen in them, saying that they should have warning labels on them about these risks. But as all of this was happening, a lot of scientists were like, wait a second.
When you use a phrase like consensus statement, it implies a sort of every single expert in the room believes X, Y, and Z. Like 9 out of 10 dentists recommend Colgate or something of that sort. So it implies a sort of authoritative weight to the evidence.
And implying that this was the consensus seemed to piss a lot of scientists off. Some of them wrote responses to that consensus statement saying that it was way too soon to come out so hard against acetaminophen, saying that the evidence they cited was, quote, weak, inconsistent to a large extent methodologically, unquote.
So they're saying the studies are crap.
Well, basically, yeah. That's the sciencey way of saying, what? This? This is not enough. And so a lot of scientists were really skeptical of this and didn't buy this story. Scientists like Brian. Does taking Tylenol actually increase, when you're pregnant, increase the chance that your kid will have autism?
The answer right now points towards no.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So that's the short of it.
Wow.
Up next, the long of it. We'll hear the other side of the story and tell you whether or not you can have your damn Tylenol after the break. Welcome back. This is Meryl. So far, we've gone through a lot of the evidence against acetaminophen, the ingredient in medicines like Tylenol. Lots of studies seem to find that taking it while you're pregnant does increase the chance that your kid will be autistic or have ADHD. Are you ready for the rest of the science, Rose Rimler?
Yes.
Are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
All right, so here's where Brian Lee, our epidemiologist hero, comes in gallantly with a shiny new approach to looking at this question. His paper came out just last year.
We had a study funded by NIH before everything went to hell. And we were like, hey, we could actually look at this.
And so Brian teams up with some Swedish researchers because he's actually really into IKEA.
I don't think that's why.
Yeah, you got me.
I think it's because the Scandinavians keep really good records, public health records.
Yeah, it's because they have an amazing database.
Sweden having its lovely universal healthcare system means that you can track everyone. They don't just disappear in the system. They're tracked. Everyone has access to this, right?
So yeah, they got data from a ton of kids, almost 2.5 million of them. Basically every kid who was born there over a 24-year period. And they also had data from the moms, details about their medical care, like the medicines that they took during pregnancy. And so now Brian's team looked to see, were the kids exposed to acetaminophen in utero more likely to be autistic? And right off the bat, they found that yes, they were.
Oh.
So they found that the kids who were exposed to acetaminophen had a 20 to 30% higher chance of being autistic.
Oh. That's not what I was expecting. You were about to tell me.
Right. But actually, Brian's team was sort of relieved when they found this.
This shows that we're not in crazy land, for example, that somehow our data are not flawed. We're not flawed. Everything is working as anticipated.
And that's because the effects that Brian was seeing in his data was in the same ballpark as what other groups had found. But here's where Brian and his team took a different path. They wanted to see if other factors might be muddling up the data here, making it look like it's the acetaminophen to blame when really it's something else entirely.
Yeah, okay, so Brian is trying to think of, are there other factors that might come into play here, and trying to like do some science to sort of suss those out, basically?
Yeah, and so to try to do that sussing out, he starts checking like, okay, what if some of the other factors that we know are linked to autism could be contributing to that effect that he saw, that 20 to 30% increased chance?
Mm-hmm.
Because like we talked about in an earlier episode on autism, we know that the age of the mom can affect the chance of whether her kid will be autistic. Like older moms are more likely to have autistic kids. Or if the mom has some other health condition or got sick during pregnancy, that might increase the chance for autism too.
And so those factors have been known for a while and are generally pretty well accepted.
Yeah, exactly. And so Brian's team took another look at the data, and when they started accounting for some of that stuff, like how old the moms were, the effect of acetaminophen got smaller. It went from increasing the chance of having an autistic kid by 20 or 30% down to 5%.
When it's down to like a 5% increase in risk, you start to actually wonder whether or not it's real or not.
Could it be like moms who are older are more likely to take Tylenol because they're like have more aches and pains or something like that, and we know that's separately associated with autism, that kind of a thing.
Yeah, exactly. Or a mom being sicker, right? Like you don't just take Tylenol for funsies.
Yeah.
So the other studies weren't adjusting for stuff like age of the parent, other health conditions, stuff like that?
Yeah, basically they weren't all doing the same type of adjustments.
Okay.
So that's one thing. And then there's another massive factor that contributes to whether someone's autistic. Their genes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they think that this is like the number one thing that determines whether someone's autistic. It's like 70 to 90% of it. So Brian's team wanted to know, could that be part of the story too? And that's sort of tricky to sort out. Like, ideally, you'd look at identical twins, right? And expose one to acetaminophen in the womb and then see if there's like a difference in autism rates.
I guess. I don't know how you would do that.
Yeah, exactly. You can't do that. But there's another way to get at this. They could look at siblings in their data.
What if we did this within the same family unit? So basically kids born to the same mom, but during one pregnancy, the mom used acetaminophen, and the other pregnancy, the mom didn't, right? So then you control at least partially for genetics.
Yeah, that's great. So Brian's team looked in their giant Swedish database and gathered thousands of cases like this. They crunched the numbers, and here's what they found.
Everything flatlined in terms of risk. What was already very minimal increase in risk just flatlined to absolutely no difference in risk for a child who is exposed.
No increased chance of autism.
No increased risk for autism, for ADHD, for intellectual disability. It was just a pure flatline.
Yeah, so what this means is that within a family, whether or not the mom took acetaminophen, the chance that her kid was autistic was the same.
So can you put this all together for me? Like, what's going on here exactly?
Okay, yes. So the more I learned about this, the more I realized that there could be a completely different explanation for why acetaminophen and autism might seem like they're linked. Because, if you imagine, say you're a mom of an autistic kid, that means that you're also more likely to be on the autism spectrum yourself, right? You probably have some of these autism genes too. And being on the spectrum, having some autistic traits, that's actually been linked to having more pain when you're pregnant. It's also been linked to having migraines. Yeah.
Oh.
And so, we have these reasons why people on the spectrum might be more likely to take acetaminophen. So maybe that's why it's looking like it's the medicine causing the autism, but we have a way of explaining all of this without blaming the acetaminophen at all.
So, all right, so this is like a classic sort of red herring science story.
Yeah.
So it looked like it was this one thing, but it's actually that one thing is associated with this other thing that it was sort of covering up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that could really be what's going on here. I mean, it would be like if you looked at your chance of playing outdoor pickleball, that might go up along with how likely you are to have had ice cream recently. But really, both of these things are just linked because it's warmer outside.
Uh-huh. Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
It's like they're not directly influencing the other. It's just like they're both responding to the same third variable.
Yes, there's a third variable. Exactly.
Okay, classic.
That's what it seems like to me. But there is still a back and forth here, a bit of a nerd fight. Other researchers saying Brian's study isn't perfect either, and there are still reviews coming out that say there is a link between acetaminophen and stuff like autism.
Mm-hmm.
So I asked Brian about these studies. I guess normally I would trust a meta-analysis looking at a bunch of studies over a couple studies here and there saying something else. Why should I trust your study more than this meta-analysis?
So one of the fun things with the meta-analysis is that it's a garbage in, garbage out kind of a thing. You can feed it, but your meta-analysis is not garbage into something beautiful. You can repeat something many times in completely different samples, same wrong results in every single sample.
And yeah, it's not like he's saying that these are all terrible scientists, but more that these reviews are mostly looking at studies that didn't have that genetic stuff. Like they couldn't look at siblings, they just didn't have that data. And so they couldn't do what Brian's team did. But Brian's study, it's not the only one that did do that kind of like sibling analysis. And so like there's one that just came out a couple weeks ago from Japan that did the same thing, and it backed up Brian's study.
Okay, so given all that, what do you make of all this? Like, if you were pregnant right now, would you take Tylenol?
Well, for the autism question, I do find studies like Brian's to be the most convincing. Like, I don't think there's a clear link here. And even to go back to those other concerns around Tylenol, like that idea that it might be a hormone disruptor.
Oh, the undescended testicle.
Exactly. What about the undescended testicles? And to go back to those studies on the undescended testicles are super mixed. So like some studies will find a link there, other studies don't. And actually the most recent review that I could find on this said that most studies don't find more undescended testicles in babies exposed to acetaminophen in utero.
So even the thing that started this whole suspicion of acetaminophen during pregnancy off, that has actually, upon further investigation, not really borne out. Like there might not actually be a link there either.
No, yeah, exactly. And a bunch of big medical groups agree here. They say that we don't have evidence that taking acetaminophen during pregnancy causes autism or issues with the development of the fetus. Like the FDA, regulators in Europe, a big group of OBGYNs. But like, yeah, just in case, if I did take acetaminophen, I'd try not to take it for like weeks at a time, because generally some of the studies that do find risks only find them if you take acetaminophen for like longer periods of time.
It also depends, I guess, on what you're taking it for. This is not medical, but it does make me wonder, like, if you have a high fever, yeah, that might be worse for the fetus than the like infinitesimal risk of fever. It's very interesting and fairly satisfying, actually.
Yeah.
All right.
And by the way, we did reach out to the company that owns Tylenol, and they sent us a big statement pointing to some of the science that we've talked about. And they said, quote, "We continue to believe that taking acetaminophen does not cause neurodevelopmental disorders, including autism," unquote. And for Brian's part, he really doesn't. Science supports the idea that taking a little Tylenol when you're pregnant makes the kids later become autistic or have ADHD.
Like taking off my epidemiologist hat and just, as a person hat, like blame is damaging, it's harmful, like, and it doesn't exactly help. People might be blaming themselves for like that one random Tylenol they took when, they were pregnant 10 years ago. And, if we can help, take away some of that guilt that's there, I think that's nice, because people shouldn't be feeling guilty about these things in the past.
Yeah, feel guilty about something else.
Go back to feeling guilty about eating lunch meat.
Yeah. All right, well, thanks, Rose.
Thanks, Meryl.
That's Science Versus. All right, Rose, do you want to ask me how that presented there that kind of made a big splash? So this is looking over time from science shit, Meryl. Yeah. We found it. So I asked Maureen, and so these were the cases that we were kind of missing decades ago.
It appears that. Well, we know that's true. That as the definition of autism has expanded over time, we're including a wider spectrum.
We did reach out to RFK's team to ask them what they made of this research. They didn't address that question, but instead they doubled down on the idea that there is an environmental toxin that's causing this. I also asked Catherine Lord about this. If we are labeling more people today with this label, how much does that really matter when it comes to explaining why it looks like autism has gone up?
I mean, I think it accounts for most of it. And I think all of us worry that we're consuming plastics and things that we wouldn't choose to eat or breathe. But that can't account for most of what's going on.
So in a press conference recently, Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Basically kind of poo-pooed this idea that it is just about changing diagnosis. So is he wrong, basically?
Yeah, I think he's wrong.
And there are other things that might explain why we're seeing more and more cases of autism. Like, it's become standard to screen kids when they go to the pediatrician for autism. There's also just more awareness. A lot of researchers told me they think that could be playing a role here.
Right, yeah.
And that leads me to the final thing I wanted to mention, because like now that we've got this bigger understanding of autism, of what it can be, it's really shifted the picture of what an autistic person could look like. So in the past, there was a strong bias towards diagnosing boys with autism.
The hardest thing was that if you're female, you're not autistic, because it's very, very rare.
So this is Dina Gassner, a researcher at Drexel University. And yeah, she told me that she's autistic and she wasn't diagnosed until she was 40. And she said that for so long, doctors had this idea that autism was pretty rare in girls, where today you see that ratio sort of leveling out. And it also used to be more common to get diagnosed with autism if you were white, but those numbers are also leveling out. So now in the US, white kids are not more likely to be diagnosed with autism compared to other racial groups. And it's not necessarily that, these people weren't getting any diagnosis at all. In a lot of cases, they were getting misdiagnosed with something else. This happened to Dina.
I was misdiagnosed with bipolar.
Oh, wow.
And that is not uncommon. Bipolar and personality conditions are often diagnosed in autistic women before they get their right diagnosis. And the problem with that is the medications that come with that.
Yeah, so for Dina, even though she never had bipolar, she was put on lithium. What did the lithium feel like?
Oh, I was completely dysfunctional. I just wasn't a human being for that time frame. And so I finally found a doctor who was actually treating my children, who said, I think you might want to reevaluate where you are. And he saved my life.
Gosh.
Yeah, researchers have told me that this is actually kind of a common thing, that a parent will take their kid in to get diagnosed with autism and then they'll walk away with their own diagnosis that was missed years ago.
Oh, right, which goes back to this idea that genetics is so important to this epidemic that we're seeing, because now instead of one case you have two cases.
Yeah, but it's funny, we keep using that word epidemic to describe what's going on, and I don't think that's actually the right word to describe the rising cases. I mean, lots of scientists have told me that the real epidemic here is that we are failing so many autistic people who need better services, that there's an epidemic there. But the idea that the rising cases is in and of itself a tragedy or an epidemic, I asked Dina about that. How do you feel about the fact that we're seeing more and more people being diagnosed with autism today?
I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, so for Dina, it was the start of really understanding who she was. And it also helped her find a community of other autistic people and also other moms of autistic kids, since her son is autistic too.
I was seeing that mothers of autistic kids were often abandoned by their girlfriend network. And we need nurturing and we need community. And so I started a group called Margarita Moms. And we drank margaritas and we went to see Magic Mike. and our rule was, you're not allowed to talk about your child, but you can talk about your undiagnosed husband, and we had fun. And so we're seeing this rising, army of these really neurodivergently intact, healthy, well-adjusted autistic kids that are coming up. And my grandma genes get all fired up. I'm like, oh, that's so awesome. Let me see your child dancing to Taylor Swift. It's joy. It's autistic joy that's coming out of this newer population. And so that's why much of our community is pushing back on these highly stigmatizing languages, assigning tragedy mindsets to this population. When we experience access to communication, unconditional love, and meaningful, usable supports, we have healthy, well-adjusted, but autistic people. And that's a good thing.
Yeah. Well, we've solved the case of the so-called autism epidemic.
Yeah.
Merry Christmas. Thanks, Meryl.
Thanks, Wendy.
That's Science Versus. So, the Science Versus is going to be on a little break until September while we work on